Zum großen Finale.
Welcome to the grande finale of the symposium, an international symposium organized by the Syrian Hail Mitigation Cooperative. I welcome you wherever you are, here on site or following the live stream in your office or living room. The last presentation by Professor Paulitsch referred to the basic principles of radar, and a question was sent in that said the thunderstorm data is cut out from the radar, and how does this work? A very technical question. Well, you can define a threshold value and then cut out the cells. For the analysis, what we normally do is we take a 45 limit value of White-Vogel criterion. So yes, it's 40 dBz, that's the limit value. So Mr. Paulitsch, you agreed to hold a second presentation because the colleague is unavailable today. And you will be talking now about the coordination of the Styrian hail mitigation. And I would like to ask you now for this presentation. So I am representing my former employee, Mr. Satyanarayana Thani. He's from India, and he first worked at the Wegener Center, and 6 years ago he joined me at the department, and now he has a new job, and last year he worked a lot for the Hail Mitigation Cooperative, especially with regard to coordinating the flights. And I would like to report about his work. And he wrote the presentation, and I am only holding it. So what does a coordinator do? Well, organizes the time schedule. So such a person would sit down in the morning to define the activities for the day and uses wind maps and weather maps, etc. And then the person in charge defines who should be on standby and when the deployment times will start. This is important because the pilots have to prepare the aircraft, and so they need to know 2 to 3 hours in advance when they will be needed and when they have to take off. In the course of the day, he would observe the thunderstorm activity, and for this he uses the weather radar. And for the chief of operations, it is important to see and check whether the cell is maybe reducing in size, and it is also his task to coordinate the pilots, to send them messages and information, to tell them when the deployment begins and when it ends, etc. And once the pilots are in the air, the coordinator, the chief of operations, tells them where they are and where the colleagues are and where there may be cells developing in a specified area. But on site, it is up to the pilots to decide how to mitigate the hail risk, because they know what the updraft situation is, where it is safe to fly into the cell and where not, etc. So the final decision lies with the pilot. In each aircraft, there is a tablet PC, and the pilots can see the radar on this screen. So not only the weather outside the aircraft, but also on screen, and this helps him to define the aircraft position. So because a pilot cannot enter any cloud, especially, or not every cloud, because if there is very strong hail or rain, it is safer to stay at the edge of the cloud, and it is always safe to stay away from the precipitation zone and from the updraft. And so the chief of operations will suggest where the pilots should move, in which direction they should move, etc. And here you see the workplace of our chief of operations. 4 monitors, 4 screens, so he has the weather under control at every moment. Here are the current areas where the Styrian hail mitigation pilots work. I hope that everyone watching online or following online knows where Styria is located. It's this white state in the map on the left-hand corner, and the yellow areas are covered by the Styrian Hail Mitigation Cooperative, and the red ones by the Südflug organization. And the white areas are areas that are not serviced. These are communities that have not concluded a contract with the cooperative, and communities that are not interested in hail mitigation services. So, one of the communities that is still in yellow here has meanwhile signed such a contract and should now be depicted in yellow as well. And the most important system that we use is the radar system for the detection of thunderstorms. We have 2 of them, and it is very important that the radar is very swift. And it says a fast scanning radar system with a high spatial resolution is decisive in order to monitor the life cycle of thunderstorms and the implementation of hail prevention or mitigation measures. The radar on the Reicherhöhe mountain offers a very fast scan performance, reflectivity with high resolution and Doppler speed data, which is important for timely decision about deployment. And the radar can also operate depending on the application with a range of 60, 100, 200, or 300 kilometers. And normally, this 60-kilometer distance is enough. The range of 60 kilometers is enough for our purposes. So, as I said, the fast scanning system makes it possible to detect thunderstorms early and also to see where the clouds move. We are talking here of 30 seconds updates every 30 seconds. So every 30 seconds you will see how the situation has changed. The early detection of thunderstorms is very important for the planning of hail mitigation measures, and it also helps to manage the pilots efficiently. And the chief of operations has a radar controller interface that makes it possible to operate the radar to monitor the height profile of the clouds and the development of the severity of the thunderstorms. So this is what the chief of operation will see. This is a radar image of the Reicherhöhe radar, which was taken on the 10th of June 2020. And at 10:26 in the morning. So there are intensive cells in the south of the town of Gleisdorf, and this is a vertical section, and on the right-hand side you see the intensity broken down to height or altitude, and this is up to 10,000 meters, and at the altitude of 3,000 meters, there was the 0 degree line. So this was an area where hailstones were definitely produced. This is something comparable. This is from a radar on another mountain, namely the Zirbitzkogel, and here we have a height profile through the same cell that we saw before, and the image is similar. And the tops are even higher here, even more than 10 kilometers. And the differences between the two radar systems have to do with the distance, because the radar ray becomes wider the higher the distance. And so this means that it is important that the radar is as close to the place of deployment as possible, because the farther away, the poorer the quality. And this is the Chief of Operations, Satya, who is analyzing the weather here in this photo. And so you can say if there is a thunderstorm situation like this one here, this means work for a whole day, because he will spend the whole day coordinating the pilots, making sure that everything works efficiently and safely, and so a lot of work. But what I have now is some examples, and the first example I have is from the 29th of June in the year 2020. And I start with the starting situation. That was at 9:40 in the morning, and this is the distribution of the hail events. And we heard earlier that in the morning there is less probability of hailstones, but on this day it started early. And you see here at 9:45, and you see the little dots coming here. These are aircraft that take off and go towards the cloud. So 3 here, and 10 minutes later they have reached the cloud, and we can now observe the development, and we see that one of the aircraft moves towards the west and enters the second cell, while the other two still work on the first one. And if we then continue with the development, we see that in the west, new cells are developing here.
Es ist hier also dann auch für die Einsatzleitung die Herausforderung zu entscheiden, bleibt man jetzt auf der ersten Zelle.
So the Chief of Operations will decide whether an aircraft will stay in the first or move on to the second or third cell.
Und wenn man natürlich auch einen längeren Verlauf hat.
And it always is also a question
Wenn Sie schon mehrere Stunden in der Luft sind,
of time. Pilots need to make a break and refuel. So if they've been up in the air for several hours, they have to come back at some point. And here we have 4 or 5 aircraft in the air. You see the cells spreading, and there is a line of 14, and more are coming in from the west. So this is a situation where 4 aircraft are not enough.
das war auch schon das Ende dieses Beispiels. Hier habe ich noch einmal.
So this was example number 1. Here are the flight tracks of this day, and you see that the entire area was covered by the aircraft. Then I have another example from the year 21. This was the 23rd of July. And here again, it all started in the north of Graz with one cell, 12:15 UTC, so early afternoon, very early afternoon.
Der Beginn, man hat gesehen, die Zelle hat sich da gebildet und beginnt zu wachsen. Und
The cell is growing,
unterwegs.
and the first 2 aircraft are in the air, and they are moving towards the core of the cell, try to seed the center, and now they are moving along with the cell. And at the same time, there is also a development that we have seen before, namely that more cells are developing and they are moving in as well, and not only in the north, but also in the south here, and also more to the north and to the west. So if we continue, we see how the situation changes, namely that new cells keep developing, and all of them need to be seeded. And if we count them, I think we have 9 or 10 cells here, all in all. So the Chief of Operations has to make a decision where to start, where to stop, and I just continue with these images so that you can see where the aircraft are. And of course, you have to say that this is not a simple task, because when a pilot has to go from the first to the second cell, then they may have to go through precipitation. So it may be difficult to reach the second cell because they would have to go through an area where it rains. And yeah, so this is what it looks like. And as you can see, the intensity is decreasing over time. And so this suggests that the hail mitigation measures worked. But at the same time, more cells develop in the northwest of Graz, new cells coming in from there. And also for the pilots, there is no break. There is no break for the pilots on a day like this. And here again, at the end of the day, the flight routes. So you see the entire area was covered. There is not a single community that was left out. And so they really covered a great distance on this day. And then one final example from the 27th of July 2019. So this is not an example of hail mitigation flights, but it is an example of damage and an analysis of the potential hail damage, because I want to show what happens if it happens. So this is a chart from the reported damages of the year 2019, where many orchids were hit. And I picked one day, and this is the 27th of July. And here we see the reports of the hail insurance. Red is the area with the most with the highest number of damages reported. And what is noticeable here is that all in all, 1,040 damage cases were reported. But this has to be compared to the overall number per year. Per year, on average, it's 4,000 reports that are filed, and on this single day, 1,040 were submitted to the insurance. So that's quite impressive. And we can access the ESWD, and for this day, we see that there were many cases reported in different places, and it says here maximum damage, maximum diameter 8 centimeter. In St. Stephan, a little village in Western Styria, the average size was 7 centimeters diameter. So if we look at the radar image and try to analyze the trajectory, it's not easy because there are many cells that developed at the same time. So we decided to use this one here, the big one in the middle, and looked at the various parameters that you can see depicted in the curves to the right. And these cells have a specific lifespan. And normally this lifetime is 2 hours. And during these 2 hours, the parameters increase significantly. And these parameters include liquid in the cloud, kinetic energy. And then after this upward surge, there is a steep decline of these parameters. And the kinetic energy is shown here for the same time. And we see that in the area of the town of Vildon, the intensity was highest. Again, the same levels, red, yellow, and purple. And this is an area where hailstones with 8 or 7 centimeters diameter were reported, and this corresponds precisely to the high kinetic hail energy. And of course, we have photos of this day, and we see what hailstones of this size can cause. They damage pumpkins and wheat, cornfields, and it looks as if they were raided. Roofs are damaged. This is what it looks like from the inside. So looking out through the holes in the roof. Of course, this is not a pleasant sight, and this was a region here where there are no hail mitigation flights, because these communities have not signed a contract. But of course, such extreme disasters can happen everywhere at all times. So it is very important that you do have a system in place that can help reduce the damage. What we have here is a damage analysis that was made by means of camera drones. So we thought, well, if there is damage, let's examine the damage, and why not use drones? Because often these areas are hard to access. So we launched a drone and focused on 3 areas. One was an apple orchard, 2 were apple orchards, and 1 was a pumpkin field. And so the results for the pumpkin field the results were very good. These are the photos that the drone made, so you can actually see the damage. But for the orchards, this was not possible. The drone did not work because there were hail protection nets in place. So the drone couldn't make any photos because the nets are very tight. But here we have the pumpkins, and if you use automatic calculation algorithms, you can assess the damage easily. And we used the drones from a department of the University of Technology. It's a fixed-wing drone and a rotor drone with 8 rotors, and they are equipped with different cameras, digital color cameras, but also spectral cameras, and they can rise to 50 to 200 meters and take photos. Maybe an issue for the future, something that can be used to assess damages. We hope that we will not see damage like this year, and I would like to thank you for your attention and come to the end of my presentation.
Paulitsch, Dankeschön.
Thank you very much, Mr. Paulitsch.
Wie gesagt, für diesen zweiten
And thank you for holding this second presentation. Also very interesting.
Immer wieder mal Bereiche dabei, für die Sie nicht fliegen, Gemeinden,
And
kann man das gar nicht so genau
you said that there are also communities that are not covered by hail mitigation flights, but then again, the cells move on, and then the pilots will move along with it. Yes, of course, if a cell moves on, the pilots will move along with the cell, and they will not stop at the border of a community. But if it is necessary, If it is necessary, of course, the pilots will not stop at the border of a municipality or community. But you know the communities who are members of the cooperative. Yes.
Aber man kann das ja in der Luft dann, wenn man unterwegs ist, nicht einfach auslassen, weil das sind ja dann ja oft nur Kilometer dazwischen. Und besonders, wenn man jetzt dann Gemeinden hat.
Of course, you cannot leave out some communities. Sometimes you will include them automatically, even though they are not members of the cooperative. Of course, it would be nicer if the entire area of Syria was part of this cooperative. But as long as I've been dealing with hail prevention or mitigation, this has always been a topic. So, how many communities in these core areas, how many communities would you say are member of the cooperative? And is it 30, 70, 50%? This varies from region to region. Some districts are covered to 100%, and then there are other regions where the number of communities that are members of the cooperative is small. There is a question that came in. When I see a cell on the radar, doesn't that mean that I am too late? Shouldn't the hail embryos be tackled? So it's it's a question of the right time. Of course, you're right. It would be best to go there if there is no cell, but you don't know where the cells will develop. You only know when you see the cell, and only then can you assess the situation. It's not too late, but of course you have to start immediately. So you need clairvoyant powers. We actually use data to predict something. Predict something. It's always a dynamic process. The chief of operations will see when cells develop, cells without any hailstones, and will then be able to assess how this cell will develop and maybe send in an aircraft very early. So it depends on the strategy of the chief of operations and how predictive he is able to work. Yes, this is the many years of experience, of course, that he have. So the question by Mr. Neuber was referred to proactive seeding. Yeah, well, we know from experience, if the chief of operations has been in the business for quite some time, he will know, or she will know, how fast the cell develops. But doesn't this also, or let me phrase this differently, doesn't it depend very much on the region where the person works? Is the situation in the south of Syria different to the one in the east? Or if somebody works in India, will he or she be able to also work here in Syria? Well, of course, this requires that the person learns about the conditions on site and knows what the situation is. A comment. The task of the chief of operations is to predict the development of hail cells so that we are able to go there in due time with our aircraft. Yes, it's precisely what we said earlier. This is really what it's all about. It's about being in the place where you are needed at the right time, early enough. So this early enough would mean that you may not even see a cloud in the sky, and you already have to know that you have to deploy the aircraft. Thank you very much, Mr. Paulitsch, and thank you very much for your presentation, and have a good afternoon.
Kommen wir noch einmal zum Christian Gruber.